Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Fire Safety Essentials. This particular Fire Safety Essentials is aimed at the Mortlake community and surround. So welcome the folks of Mortlake, and thank you for joining us this morning. Myself, Raj Samurai, and Julie Owens will be hosting this online presentation this morning. And thank you very much for being on board. The presentation will last for about an hour to an hour and a half, and will cover fire safety essentials. I would like to begin by, as is traditional, by welcoming and acknowledging the Eastern Maar people. Now, the Eastern Maar people are the traditional custodians of the land on which we are hosting this online meeting today. And I'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and of course, any other Aboriginal people present here today. I'd like to hand over the controls now to Julie to give us an introduction to the technology that we're using today. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Raj, and good morning, everyone. Yes, we're on a webinar this morning, and a webinar means that you cannot turn on your computer or your audio. You will be able to interact by answering polls when we put them up, and by the chat function. We are recording this webinar, but the recording is more for Raj and my benefit than for yours. There's no indication that you are part of the audience. We cannot see or hear the audience in the recordings. The interaction, as I said, there will be a short video and some animations during this presentation. Raj will talk a little bit more about those when he introduces them. The chat function is the way to communicate with us. So if you hover your mouse over the little chat icon, the chat box should appear. Raj and I will be monitoring that chat box during the presentation. So if you've got any questions or any thoughts, then use the chat function. We also have a polls function. We'll be using that during the presentation. We have some questions that we would like you to answer. The polls are anonymous, they're optional. You scroll through the responses and you then hit submit once you've done the polls, but I'll explain that a little bit later when we do a poll. We might first use the chat function by let's have a practice of the chat function. So if you would like to open up your chat box and make sure it says all panelists and attendees, let us know where you're from. What part of Mortlake and surrounds are you from? If you just type in there where you're from, and then we'll be able to see that. We might also, while we're letting you do that, we might also have a practice of the polls function. It is possible to have both boxes up together. So just have a look at the polls. I'm going to launch the poll now. And it just asks you a few questions. That also might give you some ideas of what you might want to ask us in the chat function. How long have you lived in the area? Between 1 year, 1 and 5, 5 and 10, or over 10. Have you been to a CFA meeting before? Yes, no, or can't remember. And how did you find out about this session? Recommended by friends, social media, newspaper, community notes board, or other. If you just tick one of those, you'll see that this is more for our benefit so that we can better improve our communication with you. So I'll end the polling there, and I'm going to share the results. So as you can see, we don't know who's done what, we just know how many and what people have voted for. So you can see that there are a few people have been around, they've been to CFA meetings before. I'm sorry, and the last one was how do you rate your knowledge of fire? So you just have scrolled through those, and that some people have an idea of fire and others haven't. So I will just stop sharing those results now, and thank you very much for that. And I'll hand you back to Raj.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Julie. And I'm just going to cross out of my poll box there before we carry on. That's fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Julie. I mean, look, the technology is very straightforward. But look, if you've had any problems, just raise your hand or mention it through the chat function and we can certainly help you. That's what we're here for. This is designed to be an interactive session to giving us your feedback so we can be better informed for your locality. Okay, let's move on. Let's get started. What are the learnings today? Learnings are, well, it's certainly not death by PowerPoint. That's something that we're dead against. We are really here to give you some clear information around the very basics when it comes to fire, what to expect from fire, how do you know if there's a fire in the area, what communication channels do we use, the importance of planning and decision making, pivotal to a good outcome, and of course surviving if your plan fails. And we've got to accept that even the best laid plans can fail. So what are your options then? So they're our key learnings today. Before I go on, I just want to say that this presentation is tailored for your community, for Mortlake and the surrounding environment, okay? So we've taken careful consideration of your location and of course the topography of the land as well, the lay of the land. Mortlake is located in the municipality of Moyne, as a lot of you will already know. It's actually a historic settlement which lies at the base of Mount Shadwell. So Mount Shadwell is in your site, if you like. It's actually an extinct volcano. And this was interesting when I was doing some research to find this out. The town, which has a large number of impressive bluestone buildings, lies in an area of fertile volcanic plains, which have produced a rich pastoral and agricultural district. The area is known for its olivine crystal, which can be fossicked on Mount Shadwell. And the interesting thing with Mortlake, it actually has a very wide main street, and that's an interesting observation. The township was first surveyed in 1853 and named after a village in Surrey, England. Now, I didn't know that. As an Englishman, I didn't realise there was a place in Surrey called Mortlake, but there you go. But it's now a suburb of Greater London. So just a bit of general background about the township where you guys live. The population is holding steady at about 1372, slight increase on previous years, and that was taken at the 2016 census. The underlying thread behind all of this is the fact that we can clearly see, and Julie and I have seen this as we traveling around the state, doing a lot of face-to-face presentations, the tremendous amount of community spirit that resides in our smaller townships. And that it's the strength of that community spirit that keeps us all safe during periods of critical danger, be it a fire, be it a flood, whatever it might be. And this is synonymous with many small rural townships like Mortlake. So that's a good important thing to remember. And that's something that the CFA, the Country Fire Authority, take very seriously and are very appreciative of. So let's move on and move into the area of, understanding local fire risks. As I say, this presentation is tailored for yourselves in your locality. There is no need to take notes. All the information that we're providing here, the key information, will be available by way of downloads at the end of the presentation, and we'll certainly give you an indicator to where to actually find those resources. Understanding local fire risk is all about knowing your locality. So let's move on to the next slide and talk a bit more about the very nature of Mortlake. Let's speak generally first about the landscape that exists throughout Victoria. This slide, it shows you a cross-section of some of those landscapes. We've got sort of a huge amount of grassland, and that's very, very dominant in Mortlake for sure. Bushland as well. There are areas of mountainous forested area. We spoke about Mount Shadwell a few seconds ago. We also talk about extensive amounts of farmland, a lot of agricultural practice across the state of Victoria, and particularly in the area of Mortlake and around. Generally speaking, Victoria is one of the most fire-prone areas of the world, and the risk throughout the state is very different as a result of this changing landscape. Some areas of the landscape will be more susceptible to different types of fire, and we'll talk about that shortly. Let's just go back to our ancestors and how things have evolved across Australia. Fire has been present on the Australian continent for millions of years, and there's no doubt about that. This fire has been significant in shaping the landscape. Many fires were started by lightning and still are started by lightning. Some of our more recent fires across the southwest, particularly this time last season, were started by lightning. Aboriginal people used fire for many thousands of years to care for country. What do I mean by care for country? The fires were a tool that encouraged the growth and extent of grasslands, to enhance hunting, and of course it reduced levels of fuel. This reduction in fuel load, as we talk about it these days, kept the vegetation from becoming too dense and hard to walk through. Interestingly, records in terms of bushfire keeping records were only maintained or started about 1851 in the early days of European settlement. So that kind of gives you a snapshot of where fire and caring for country comes into the bigger picture when we talk about fire behaviour across our state. Let's just peel back the layers a bit more. Let's make it more relevant to the here and now. So what is it now that we need to be aware of across our state? The map that you're seeing on your slide at the moment shows you the different weather districts. The take home here is that across each weather district, each weather district will have its own level of fire risk. East Gippsland will be very different to the central or the southwest region. So remember that each weather district will have its own level of fire risk. Let's take that to the next level. When we break this down just a bit further, and don't be too bamboozled by how technical this slide might look, it's not at all designed to be technical. You've got the map on the left, which gives you temperatures, and on the right-hand side, we're talking rainfall. We are currently in what they call the La Nina effect. Both Julie and myself are in the southwest. We're in Woodford and Wangoon, respectively. We're both members, volunteer firefighters in our local brigades as well. So we have experience in terms of fire behaviour and firefighting. But we have what we're now in is a La Nina weather pattern. And La Nina is typified by rain. We've actually had rain this morning. But Julie, did you have rain this morning?
We had a little bit, not much, but a little bit, yes.
Yeah. Which is very atypical of this time of the year. I've just spent the weekend away in the Otways, and we were talking to some park rangers, tremendously green for this time of the year. And this is a consequence of what we call the La Nina effect. La Nina is excessive rainfall, more so than normal, okay? So the two maps will typify this. So what we're saying essentially is that we're seeing this weather pattern, which is expected to reduce the level of prolonged fire activity in our area, well, across most of Victoria compared to this time last year, okay? And I think, fingers crossed, as CFA firefighters, this is what we want. We want reduced fire activity. I'll just move on to the next slide. Oh, no, sorry, go back to the previous slide. Before I move on from this slide, I just want to make a few other quite pertinent points about what La Nina really means. It means that, yes, we've already said increased rainfall, but it also means cooler daytime temperatures, particularly south of the tropics. And that's what the map on the left-hand side is showing. And of course, we'll have warmer overnight temperatures in the north. And that's again typified by the map on the left-hand side. Warmer up north, cooler in the south. For your information, the last La Nina effect happened during the winter of 2017-18. And this was followed by El Nina, its cousin or counterpart. There is a bit of a duality of role here, a cyclical pattern between these two weather trends, La Nina, El Nina. Last El Nina followed in 2018-2019, which is essentially the opposite of this. So what does this mean in terms of Mortlake and your local seasonal outlook? Well, Mortlake is in a part of Victoria that has experienced this slightly above average rainfall. This has meant an above average amount of soil moisture in the ground. More moisture, great news for the farmers, fantastic news for the farmers, because there is prolific growth of fuel, be it grass, be it other forms of fuel. There's enough moisture in the ground to make these fuel loads grow fast and grow rapidly. And then if we couple this with the rapid drying or curing, you have a recipe of a high fuel load available for ignition in the event of a bad fire day. So what's the take-home message for us? The take-home message is, like every season, there is a need to be prepared for a fire that could happen as a result of this increased fuel load. La Nina is creating an environment of increased fuel load. We've had some high daytime temperatures. Sometimes we've had it in excess of 30 degrees, which has meant that the fuel load has dried very rapidly. Let's move on to the next slide, which looks at the local vegetation. At this stage, what I'd like to do is open up the chat function and ask our listening audience and viewing audience to give us some indication of how they would describe their local vegetation. What's the landscape looking like in and around Mortlake? Great, okay. Well, it's great to hear your responses. How's it looking there, Julie? How's the chat function giving us some feedback on the local landscape?
It has given us some feedback, Raj, mainly the high level of growth in the paddocks and along the roadsides.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So the predominant fuel around Mortlake is grass. There's no doubt about that. I drove through Mortlake yesterday. Yep, areas of bush and then I guess bush along roadsides as well, heaps of it.
And people have mentioned the Fram Forest, which isn't that far away from Mortlake as well.
Of course. And and we're going to spend a bit of time talking about embers very shortly. Now, when we speak about embers and the ability of embers to be trapped in trees and canopies, Fram Forest is a classic example of very high risk ember traps, and we'll spend a bit of time talking about that shortly, and we'll explain what embers are for those of you that may not know what they are. They are a critical part of fire progression. So we'll talk about that shortly. So there is a risk.
Sorry, Raj, someone has mentioned that the Fram Forest is to the south, but we also, when we talk about the nature of fire, we'll talk about how unpredictable it is. And even though it isn't usually in the way of a fire, like Fram Forest isn't really a threat to Mortlake, that doesn't mean we become complacent and think it may never happen.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, Julie. We can't take any, when we talk about fire behaviour, and I'm hoping that this presentation brings this across to you. When we talk about fire behaviour, that is not a given situation that a fire will behave in a certain way. As Julie has said, fire is unpredictable. Okay, and that kind of moves into my next point. If there were to be a fire this time of the year now in and around Mortlake, it would more than likely be a fast-moving grass fire. Okay, with the possibility of ember attack coming from the nearby bush to the north, northwest, and also to the west as well. But that's possible, but it may come, as I say, from a different direction as well, depending on that wind. Open grassland is susceptible to that wind. The wind is the driving force. The wind drives the fire in a particular direction. We talk about the fire front. That's the header. That's the front of the fire. The direction of this fire front is pushed along by the wind. A change of wind direction will mean a change of fire direction. When we take into consideration the topography, the lay of the land, we spoke about Mount Shadwell, but there are other huge inclines and depressions in and around Mortlake. Fire will travel much faster uphill than it will downhill. And without getting too technical, the two fundamental reasons why fire travels faster uphill than downhill is radiant heat, and we're talking about that shortly, but also convective heat as well, the point of contact of the flames as they progress up an incline. Don't become complacent if you think that you're sheltered from hills and valleys that are around you, but there are a false sense of security. Fire will reach you far more rapidly traveling uphill towards you than you may have otherwise have thought. The other point that I would like to make is that there is no predictability. The one thing that we want to try and get across to you this morning in this presentation, Fire Safety Essentials is about being prepared and being out of harm's way at an early time. Leaving early, away from a potential danger source, is the way to go. We'll speak more about that shortly. Let's talk about local risks. And Julie, maybe we need to launch a poll at this stage.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Raj. We'll launch this poll, which asks you what you think are the local risks in your area. This time it's a multiple choice, so you can choose one or as many as you want of these things. Some of these things may not directly relate to you, but some may. So narrow winding roads, trees hanging over access roads and escape routes, high tourist area in summer, the speed of grass fires up to 20 kilometres an hour, numerous grass fires sparked by embers, and high fuel load. So if you just tick one or two or three or all of those that you think may be your local risk. And I see people have done that. So I'll end the polling and share the results. And you see that people have ticked all of those. Even the high tourists in summer is a good one, because there are a lot of people who travel through Mortlake and that Hamilton Highway, either heading to Hamilton or Warrnambool. So and I'm glad to see that everyone remembered to hit the submit button after they had ticked their result. So I'll stop sharing that now and hand it back to you, Raj.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Julie. So yeah, so I just want to make a comment on a couple of things there. You know, Mortlake is 50 k's down the road from where I live. It is a common route that I use to go to Melbourne or to other parts of the state. And yes, I do often stop at the fuel station there or pick up something from the cafe. Yes, and it does get busy. You know, it's got a large parking bay for big recreational vehicles. There, it is used as a common thoroughfare. So you can imagine, in the event of a bad fire day, with this higher number than normal of travellers on the road, it will cause an impediment. It will cause access or exit difficulty should you be wanting to depart from your home in a hurry in the event of a fire. And of course, the other consideration we need to make here is that often many of our travellers may not have the same degree of fire sense or be fire savvy. So that again may actually compound the situation. When we talk about limbs across the road, etc., you know, when we talk about ember attacks and the potential for fires in canopy fires, there's always going to be potential for limbs to block roads. And this is another consideration when it comes to fires and fire behaviour. We've already spoken about that tremendous amount of fuel load and the risk of fast-moving grass fires. There are a lot of narrow roads in and around Mortlake, I've noticed, particularly as you head up towards Ararat to the left and towards the back of Mortlake as well. All these are possible local risks for your area. And I'm sure that if you know of any other risks, please feel free to make comment in the chat box. Just give us some of your local intel. And that's how this presentation really works, is with feedback from yourselves, so we can all be better informed about those local risks. When we talk about local risk, we also need to take into consideration the community at large as well. There may be members of the community who are more vulnerable, and that in itself can create a risk for our fire brigade. How does our fire brigade identify those people, get them out early, give them assistance early? And this is where that sense of community comes in. The population of Mortlake is relatively small. We have a very cohesive community that will look out for each other, hence mitigate that risk. Both Julie and I are very passionate about risk management, being out of harm's way, moving away from danger in good time. Leaving early, that is the best option. When we talk about the resources that we do have at hand, we have the Mortlake Brigade, who in their hard-working capacity do a lot of great stuff. Okay, but let's be really realistic at the at the potential or the capacity of that brigade to service you in the event of a bad fire day. They have a number of resources at their disposal: 2 tankers, 1 pumper, 1 forward control vehicle, and a quick fill. Okay. Now you might think there's a lot of resource there, but they actually have to look after a population of almost 1,400 people and a number of just over 700 homes and dwellings. The rhetorical question that we like to pose at this stage is, how realistic would it be, and how confident would you be to expect a CFA crew and tanker on your drive, at your farm, at your business, at the time of a bad fire day? How realistic is that? And I'm sure that you'll agree, and it's not rocket science, that the capacity of our local brigade is limited. And this is why we need to take control, we need to take ownership of the situation and have our own way of dealing with fire and fire behaviour. We need to have a fire plan that allows us to be prepared and ready should a fire occur. We need to know what our triggers are to make us want to get our plan into action. And we'll talk about some of those pointers now as we progress through the rest of this presentation. So what do we need to expect from a fire? What is fire? Is fire just flames? Well, I'm hoping the next part of this presentation will give you a real clear and graphic visual of what fire and fire behavior is all about. I'm about to share with you something that some of you might find a bit alarming, in which case feel free to look away and then join us at the end of the 2-minute or so presentation. Let's not forget that Victoria has had its fair share of fires. We've already said that it's a very bushfire prone part of the world. Last summer was no exception. We had huge fires in multiple parts of the state. And I'm sure that some of our listeners and viewers this morning will have personal experience of such fires. Let's get underneath the skin of fire and give you a real taster of what fire does, what fire is capable of, and how not to underestimate the danger that is fire. So I'm about to share with you an animation. It's called Ember Attack. It is graphic. Please look away if you feel that it's in any way going to cause any distress to you. Thank you.
During a bushfire, embers will reach your home long before the flames do. Ember attacks are the most common way that houses catch fire. Embers are burning leaves, twigs, and pieces of bark. They help the bushfire spread by starting spot fires ahead of the main fire front. Short-distance ember attacks happen when leaves and small pieces of bark are blown from burning trees. The intense shower of sparks that forms fills the air with hot, burning embers, which will land on nearby vegetation and properties. The hot embers can easily land and get into your clothes and burn your skin, eyes, and airways. Small fires will start all around you and quickly become uncontrollable. The resulting chaos creates confusion as the fire seems to come from many directions, meaning it will be difficult to make good decisions about your safety. The experience will be physically exhausting and emotionally traumatic. Long-distance ember attack is caused by large bushfires that generate intense heat. As the hot air rises, it forms a column of smoke that sucks in air like a vacuum, increasing the intensity of the fire. The updraft in the column lifts embers, like large pieces of burning ribbon bark, hundreds of metres into the air, where strong winds can carry them many kilometres beyond the fire front. On Black Saturday, embers travelled more than 30 kilometres ahead of the main fire. When these embers land, They often start fires where leaves naturally accumulate, like in gutters, doorways and garden beds. So while you might think you're safe when a bushfire is far away, embers can fall from the sky and land around your home long before you even know there's a fire. But remember, your home isn't the only thing under threat during an ember attack. By the time you realise the danger, it might be too late as escape routes become jammed. Embers can also start fires on roads and block them completely, making late evacuation dangerous or impossible. That's why leaving early, before a fire starts, is always your safest option.
You know, it's quite amazing, isn't it? You know, I've viewed that, both Julie and I have viewed this presentation a number of times, and each time it gives us the same tingling sensation around the indiscriminate nature of fire, its harshness, the danger level. You know, if you do become complacent, you know, and you see these embers dropping around you, how scary must that be? And we don't ever want to be in that situation where we have to witness an ember attack on our property at that last minute, at that latter stage. We need to be out of harm's way. We know that embers can travel up to 30, 40 Ks, and they mentioned that the Black Saturday fires, which were truly historic in what the devastation that they caused and the fatalities that they brought about. We never ever want to be in that situation again. We have the lessons and we have the evidence to say that ember attack and being in harm's way is not good. Let's heed the warning signs and be out of harm's way. Because ember attack does cause the biggest loss of property during a fire. Yes, your property may be lost, but do you want to lose your life? Do you want to, is it worth it? We would say no, that the CFA is passionate about driving you away from your home in the event of a bad fire day. We want you to be out of harm's way. Leave it to the professionals, leave it to the people that understand fire to do their job. Some of the images that you're seeing on the screen at the moment give you an indication of the different types of grass fire and of course the landscape following the grass fire. It looks very different, doesn't it? But the amount of heat that can be generated from grass fire is enough to kill. And we've spoken about that. So, Julie, do you want to add anything there while I tee up the next animation?
And it's good to note, Raj, that even during a grass fire, embers are created and spread. So people often think it's only through if a bush is on fire and it's a very large fire that those embers will spread. But no, grass fire is capable of spreading embers as well. And embers are the greatest cause of property loss in a fire.
Wonderful. Thanks, Julie. So, okay, so that was our first animation on embers, one part of fires. Another very important and critical part of fire is something called radiant heat. Now, I'll let the animation do the talking and we can have a debrief afterwards. If anyone is impacted by this or sensitive to this information, please look away. It is designed to shock. We want to get the message over to you that we never ever want to experience radiant heat and we never ever want to be in line of an ember attack. So here's radiant heat.
Victoria is one of the most bushfire-prone parts of the world. Every summer, bushfires threaten properties and lives. But did you know it's not the flames that kill most bushfire victims? No, it's the radiant heat. Most victims die from the effects of radiant heat long before they're reached by the flames. Radiant heat is what you feel when you sit next to a campfire. If a campfire heats up to 2 kilowatts per square metre, you'll feel that it's too hot and will want to move back from the fire. If you don't, this amount of radiant heat is enough to cause burns and blisters in as little as 40 seconds. 12 kilowatts. It can cause some materials, like dry timber, to ignite. A bushfire can reach 100 kilowatts, and the effects can be truly catastrophic. For humans, radiant heat can cause burns from 100 metres away and cause a dangerous increase in body temperature. Radiant heat can cause the rapid onset of heat stroke. Heat stroke damages your brain, meaning you won't be able to concentrate to make good decisions as the fire arrives. Other impacts include severe damage of internal organs and death. There are some things you can do if you're caught in a fire. Cover your skin with long-sleeved natural fibre clothing, like wool. It's also useful to know that radiant heat only travels in straight lines and can't bend around corners. So, sheltering behind or inside solid structures may help protect you. But be aware, radiant heat will travel straight through glass. The best defence against radiant heat is a simple one. If you're not anywhere near a bushfire, its radiant heat can't hurt you. Leaving early is always your safest option.
I think the animation speaks for itself, doesn't it? You know, I don't need to say anything more there. Radiant heat is a killer. You know, it will kill, and it will kill indiscriminately. Why be in harm's way? Before I move on, I just want to make one point about embers that I did forget to mention, and that's what we call direct flame damage. Ember attack is one form of your property becoming a flame, or areas around your property becoming ignited by those spot flames. Another means of direct flame damage or direct flame impact is that continuous line of fuel that will reach your home. Okay, so when we talk about fast-moving grass fires, particularly, these will progress at rapid speed. We said up to 20 k's an hour plus, depending on the strength of the wind and the amount of fuel, and a couple of other factors, but we won't go there at the moment. When we have that continuous amount or continuous line of fuel to your property, we often say that if you've got fuel to your property, you have fire to your property. One way that we can mitigate that risk or limit the risk of that fire reaching your home is to create a divide. Break that continuity of fuel between the advancing grass fire or the fire front and your home. And the way we can do that is by creating a drive, a gravel drive, for example, a clearing around your home, an area of green, short green vegetation around your home that will not ignite as quickly. Anything that you can do to break that continuity of fuel will break that direct fuel damage. It will buy you time should you ever be caught in that situation. When we talk about germination of seeds and propagation and some of the things that our indigenous forebears had, we often say that the land or the vegetation looks to burn. It's ready to burn. And that's all referring to the regeneration and regrowth of those important seeds for flora and fauna. So let's not be too dismissive of the importance of fire, but on the same token, we need to break that continuity of fuel to our property. Julie?
Thanks, Raj. So Raj is correct in that there's the direct fire, there's the ember attack, and there's radiant heat, are all elements of fire that are dangerous to you and your property during a fire.
I think what I'd like to do, this is something that the CFA do a lot of, you know, particularly following bad fire days, is they will very empathetically have conversations with persons that have survived fire. And what you see here are a couple of statements made by these individuals. And I think it's all in the words. I think they speak volumes. What I'd like to supplement this with, while we're on this kind of emotional journey, that kind of emotional intelligence that's related to how we feel at bad events, whether any critical event, I'd like to stop sharing this particular screen and share with you another animation. Now, this particular animation is entitled "I'll Never Do That Again," and it gives you a descriptor, first-hand description from real life people. These are not actors. These are people that have been caught in situations, and this is their genuine account of how they felt, both physically and mentally.
"10 years ago, when all the dams were full and the tanks were full and there was plenty of water, I probably would have stayed and I would have died."
Nothing went the way we might have anticipated.
Whatever preparations you put into place, you only need something small to go wrong.
You know, in future, I don't think we'd want to put the kids through that sort of trauma, I guess. Yeah, wouldn't put the kids through that again.
If it was my choice, I wouldn't stay again. If we had another day like that, if I had the opportunity to get out, I would go before the fire even got here.
Before the fire even got here, that's the closing words that stay with me. And this is the one thing that we want you to understand, that you don't want to be in harm's way and you want to be gone early. Some of the key messages that we're trying to portray here are summarized by this slide here. We acknowledge now that being in a fire situation is extremely stressful and extremely traumatic. And you need to have some level of preparation. You've got to understand what you're dealing with. Fire Safety Essentials gives you that basic level understanding of the nature of fire. We spoke about radiant heat. We've spoken about ember attack. They are two clear players. We've spoken about the landscape and how that can impact the direction of fire and the speed of fire. We've spoken about entry and exit routes. They could potentially be blocked. We've spoken about local risks in your area and how you need to mitigate those should a fire happen in your area. Clearly, it's a difficult situation. So what are some of the things will impact on your ability to make good decisions? And I think at this stage, Julie, it might be a good idea to think about launching the poll.
Yeah, we might. Thank you, Raj. We might launch this next poll that gives you an idea or helps you to think about what sort of things will impact your ability to make good decisions. Yes, as Raj says, you may have your plan, you may not think you know what you're doing, but when it comes down to it, like those people in the video, when it actually happens, what are the things that are going to impact your ability to make those good decisions? So stress, rapidly changing situations, things not going to plan, not having enough time, and a communication breakdown. Once again, it's a multiple choice. Choose one or as many of those as you like. Once you've done that, click the submit, and I will now end the polling and share the results. And you will see that everyone has ticked that at least once, like everyone has ticked one of those things. So all of those things are going to be make an impact.
Thank you, Julie. I think, for me, and then the results clearly show this, is that stress by far is the one thing that really gets hit hard in a situation like this. As human beings, the majority of us do not have good stress handling capability. Now, sometimes we can handle stressful situations if we know what we're dealing with, if we know that there's a way out, we know the ins and outs of the problem that we're facing. When we're naive to a situation, when we underestimate or become complacent, and when things particularly are changing very rapidly around us, when we don't have control, or when things are not going to plan, it's not the way it was supposed to be, for example, when you're running out of time, and time is a huge bearer when it comes to stress and stress burden. All of these factors will compound stress. You're dealing with an alien entity that you have no idea of what's happening around you. Your level of control is severely diminished. Therefore, your stress load will become to increase and increase and increase. You'll become quite fraught, quite frustrated, quite frantic. And this is a situation that will make you not make good decisions. You will become irrational. Couple that with the final one, which I think is the most important one, which is communication breakdown. When loved ones that are normally around you are not there. Where are they? Are they in amongst the fire? Have they sought refuge and gone somewhere else? Where's Charlie, who has footy practice on the oval down the road? What are the horses doing? What's happening to the livestock? Where's my husband, who was on the tractor at the farm? When you couple in that level of emotional connection to people that should be around you and they're not there and you have no idea where they are, that again is a major contributor when it comes to you not being in control. So we say, why put yourself in this situation? Why have this level of undue, unnecessary stress burden when you could, in actual fact, have your fire plan, activate your fire plan, leave the day before, leave on the morning of a bad fire day, and be out of harm's way, leaving early. Just like all the testimonials that we've heard, it's all about leaving early in good time, because if you have the time when that's no longer a stress burden, you can actually plan. You can plan for everyone to be safe, be it your family, your immediate family, be it other community members or vulnerable members in the community. Okay, we're going to now enter the next stage of our presentation, which is all about knowing, how do you know if there is a fire? How do you know if there's a fire, and what are the communication channels that we do actually use? So let's open up the chat function and listen or hear from our audience this morning about, well, what's your go-to? How do you establish if there's a fire happening in your neighborhood? Yeah.
Okay, some people are saying on the radio, they listen to the radio.
Mm-hmm.
Some people actually saying they can smell smoke.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's take this to give you an understanding of what the fire danger rating is, or the FDR. Look, many of us have seen this around. You know, we may have seen it on television, on social media, but more than likely we may have seen it as we're driving around. I know there's one in Mortlake on the approach to town. You tend to find it near to fire sheds, but not necessarily. It gives us an indication of the fire danger rating. But let's take down the layers and dispel some of the confusion that exists around the FDR. Julie?
So before we do that, Raj, I might actually launch another poll.
Yeah.
This poll is actually going to ask you, what do these ratings mean? So fire danger, FDRs mean fire danger rating. But what do those ratings mean? So I'll launch this poll. And before we discuss these, it'll give me some idea of what people think. So is the FDR an indication of how likely a fire is to start? Or is it an indication of how bad a fire would be? And how many code red days have we had in the southwest in the last 5 years? And how many severe or extreme days do you think we've had in the southwest in the last 5 years? So once again, if you just click on each of those, what you think.
And of course, you know, don't worry if you don't know what the answer is, have a go, because we don't know who's answering what here. Have an informed guess. And at the end of the day, we're all learning here. It's all about learning and growing our fire safety essentials basics, so that we understand that, okay, what does code red mean, or what's severe or extreme, and what's FDR? This is all about learning. So feel free to have a go.
Okay, and everyone has done that. So I'll share the results. And you can see that Some people think it's an indication of how likely a fire will start, and others think it's how bad. The code red days, it is actually an indication of how bad a fire would be if one were to start, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a minute. How many code red days have we had in the southwest? We haven't had any in the last 5 years. We have had some in Victoria, but not in the southwest. And extreme and severe days, yes, there's been six severe or extreme days in the last 5 days. So I'll stop sharing those results now and close our polls block, and we'll talk a little bit more about what each of these ratings mean. So these ratings come on board with the fire season, at the beginning of the fire season. These are all then calculated and advertised. So low, moderate, high, and very high fires will start on each of those. In each of those ratings, on each of those days that those ratings have been designated, fires will start. But the fire that starts is very likely to be controllable. So brigades can get onto it. Those fires will be controllable. They will not develop into big grass fires or bushfires. There will be fires. And remember, fires happen all through the year, not just in summer. There will be fires. But we come to a severe day. On a severe day, this is different. So on a severe day, it'll be hot, windy, and hot and dry, and possibly windy. And if a fire starts, it will, or it may, become uncontrollable. So it'll be harder to control it if a fire starts on that day. On an extreme day, the conditions are very hot, dry, and windy. And if a fire starts on an extreme day, then it will become uncontrollable. It'll be unpredictable. It will be moving fast. There'll be spot fires, and fires will come from many directions. It will still be fought. There will be brigades out there. There will be firefighters out there attacking it, but it will be uncontrollable. It will not be easy to control. And on a code red day, then the conditions are so bad that if a bush or grass fire were to start, then it would be completely uncontrollable. And a code red day would be an example of Black Saturday in 2009. So buildings and people are not constructed to withstand a code red day. So that's why we're saying you do use these ratings to act. These are your triggers as to how you will go about enacting your plan. So CFA say leaving early on a high-risk days is the best option. You use these to decide when you're going to leave on one of these days. You know your triggers and you leave. You can return if you need to, but once a fire starts, like those people have said that we heard earlier, if you have a choice, they didn't want to be there. Well, now you do have a choice. And that's what Raj and I are advocating today. Thanks, Raj.
Great. Thanks, Julie. So I have to acknowledge that we live in a very busy world, an environment in which we are bombarded left, right, and centre with information in different means, in different ways. It's not like the old traditional days where maybe you had a conversation with someone, you heard it on the radio, or maybe you bought the newspaper. These days, we are in information overload, and I like to refer to it as infobesity. We have a tremendous amount of information that hits our senses visually, or we might hear it in a number of ways. And the digital platforms, and you can see some of the icons on this screen here, the Twitters, the Snapchat, the Facebook, these have become front and center when it comes to giving us information directly. The question that I'd like to pose now is that these information sources are what we call informal in nature. They are not totally credible, not totally legitimate, they're not evidence-based, and they certainly cannot be real time. So the one thing we like to say from the CFA is that, yes, certainly have these sources of information, but a more reliable and more formal means of communication are the following. The following 8 means of communication give you real-time, credible, legitimate, evidence-based information on fire activity in your area. And by far, one of the most popular and the ones that we would certainly advocate for is the Vic Emergency app. This is an app that can be downloaded onto your smartphone. And as a property advice visit service coordinator myself, we have been doing a lot of PAVs, or property advice visit service community awareness and door knocking, to allow our community members to understand what the Vic Emergency app is. And we've actually been helping them download it to their smartphones. It will give you that real-time information that you need in the event of a fire. It allows you to plan your travel, your journey. It will give you an indicator of fire activity in your area such that you can avoid or circumnavigate areas where there is fire activity. Other apps include the Vic Emergency Hotline, as well as Emergency Management Victoria Online. We would strongly suggest those of you that are listening this morning and don't have the Vic Emergency app, that's the one thing that we would strongly suggest that you go and investigate and have put on your phone. The resource information will give you information on how to locate and download this app onto your mobile phone. While we're here at this stage, I'll still like to make reference to local news and the importance of 774 at our local radio station. In the event of a fire, we often find that our environment is severely disrupted. It becomes a dark space, a very noisy space, and extremely disorientating. Often communication channels will be lost as antennas come down or other infrastructure is lost. Consequently, the only means of communication with the outside world will be a battery-operated radio. A battery-operated radio linking you up to your local ABC channel, 774, will be your lifeline to the outside world. So, as an important component of your emergency bag, and Julie will be talking about that later, an emergency bag should always contain a battery-operated radio. What I'm going to do now is, with Julie's help, is talk through the triage of messaging that becomes available through the Vic Emergency app in the event of fire activity in your area. Thanks, Julie.
So thanks, Raj. So the CFA have developed these warnings to give you an idea of what is actually happening in your area. So you might receive an advice warning. You will receive this on the internet, over your phone, to let you know that there's an incident in the area. It could be a fire, it could be anything else. So you might see smoke. It's letting you know there's an incident, and you need to monitor the situation. You need to keep an eye out, find out what's going on. Just let you know that there is some activity. But if you receive a watch and act, you will find that now there is an emergency in your area that is developing. You actually need to do something. You need to enact your plan. This is your trigger, if not before, to do something. If you receive an emergency warning, you will know that you're in imminent danger, that it's actually too late to leave, but you must ensure your plan. It usually means you have to shelter in place, which can be obviously a very dangerous situation to be in. So we say, do not wait for a warning. Then CFA also have developed the evacuation notification. This is just to let people know that now's the time to evacuate. CFA cannot make you evacuate. I think the police have that ability too. And a community information is information given to communities after an incident. So there's no longer a threat, but of course, places there's still fire, there has property's been destroyed. This information could be a newsletter, it could be an email, is to say where your resources are, where you can go and what you can do to get help. But the take-home message here is do not wait for a warning. Be aware of yourself of what's going on and don't depend on those forms of communication. As Raj says, they are credible, but sometimes you might be ahead of them. So don't wait for a warning. And now if this little animation, this little will show you what I mean by you might be ahead of your warnings and that you shouldn't wait for a warning. So let's use this timeline. You're in your house, it's a severe day. You know that it's hot and windy, but you decide, yeah, okay, I'm going to close the curtains, turn the air conditioner on and watch some Netflix. So a few kilometres from your fire starts. And when it starts, it takes off on its own. Remember, it's hot and windy, so it's actually got some force behind it. But it's 5 minutes at least before someone sees it and reports it. So they've now reported the fire to 000. Now the brigade's been notified that there's a fire in the area. So they're off to get in their trucks, head out to the fire. 10 minutes later, the fire has grown. Brigade's probably just got to their trucks and on their way to this fire. So just after that, because now CFA has been notified, they send out an advice message. So they send out an advice to say, there's an incident in your area, you need to monitor what's going on. But as you can see, that advice message is very close to your home. The fire is very close to your home when you get that advice message. By the time you get an emergency warning, the fire is past your house. And the emergency warning was saying, need to shelter in place, but it's too late. The fire has gone. 30 minutes, the fire is well past your place and has developed. So this animation, this little clip is meant to show you that you might be ahead of the warnings, that you're the one. You might be the one who actually reported the fire. So there's no way you would wait for those warnings. So once again, leaving early on the day before this is your best option.
Thanks, Julie. So the bottom line in all of this is not to have your blinds closed, not to have the air conditioning on, but not become complacent. Yeah. It's about staying in tune with the environment, staying alert, continually checking your Vic Emergency app when you sense something's not quite right. It's not good practice to ignore what's happening around you. Historically, we've had a few fire occurrences where people have done just that. Unfortunately, it's not had a good outcome. So let's use our senses. Let's use our sight and view the horizon. And generally speaking, a lot of us that live in our rural townships tend to be very well in tune and intuitive of the environment. We know when something's not right. We know when the skies are slightly different color. We know if there's a different sort of smell in the air, maybe the smell of smoke. We know if there's increased activity on our roads, maybe emergency vehicles or increased traffic through our social media platforms or the Vic Emergency app. We know when things aren't right. And when we sense that things aren't right, that should be our trigger to say, right, we're going to activate our fire plan. Because just if there is something that's going to kick off in our area, we can actually be out of harm's way before the rush happens, way before everyone else twigs on. We need to be gone. We can always come back if the fire direction changes or the situation calms and there's no longer a threat. But in the first instance, this is our trigger. And that old adage that if it doesn't feel right, it probably ain't right. So use your intuitive sense and be out of harm's way. Up until this part of the presentation, we're almost in the home leg now, so I appreciate you for your patience and the comments that are coming through the chat function. We've spoken about how the FDR works, the fire danger rating, how to use it, what it means. We've spoken about those credible sources of information, the formal as opposed to the informal. These will help you make informed decisions, those early decisions about, hey, this is my trigger. I need to activate my fire plan and get my family out of the way. And hey, I know about the importance of not waiting for a warning. I'm now going to, again, with Julie's help, is put all of these components together. And there are a lot of components as we've spoken about them, but I'm hoping that this hypothetical situation will give you some idea of how everything comes together to help you.
Thanks, Raj. So what we'll do now, like Raj says, everything that we've been talking about, we're now going to put together in a hypothetical. And I want you to put yourself in the situation. I will read through it. I will talk you through it. You put yourself in this situation. It's 8 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. It's extreme. The day has been declared extreme. And that usually happens the night before, so you knew it was going to be extreme. And remember, extreme is hot, dry, and windy. So you look outside and you see that it is already hot and windy in the morning, and you know that it is an extreme day. But you've got a few things you've got to do in Warrnambool. You've got a doctor's appointment. It's at 9 o'clock, so it's fairly early in the morning. So you think, well, it's still early in the morning. I can still get into the doctor's appointment and make it home by the worst heat of the day. So you jump in your car and you head to Warrnambool. And on the way, going through Ellerslie, you can see there's some little bits of bark coming from the trees. There's a bit of dust on the horizon from the paddocks, and it is hot. You can feel the heat coming through your windows, but it's still early, so you think you're okay. So you have your appointment, you go to your appointment, the doctor's a bit late, so you're a bit late. You decide to stop at the coffee shop, have a coffee before you head home. So as you're getting your coffee, you hear someone say that a fire has started on the other side of Mortlake. And you think, wonder if it's anywhere near your place. So you jump on the Vic Emergency app, you have downloaded it, and you see that, yeah, okay, it is a short distance from your place, but the triangle that shows the area is not near your house. It hasn't reached your house. In fact, it hasn't reached your property. So you think, yeah, no, I'll be okay. I'm going to get back in the car now and go home and check things out, make sure everything's okay. So you hop in the car, and you head towards Mortlake, and just past Ellerslie, the road's closed. You can't get through. The police have told you that there's rubbish across the road, it's on fire, and you can't get through. Trees come down. You can't get through. So how does that make you feel? You can't go home, can't go back. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do, and how does that make you feel? What does this mean to you that you can't get to your house? We might, if you would like to make a comment about what it means to you, just remember that the chat function is there. And I might, at this stage, while you're thinking about that, I might launch my next poll, because this gives you some idea, thinking about what you would be doing on that Wednesday, what you would do on your average Wednesday. Would you be at work, at home, on holidays? Would you be in Mortlake, or would your workplace be in Warrnambool? Would you have to go into Warrnambool to work anyway? And when you heard there was a fire, then decided to go home. Thinking about last summer, would you have been prepared to spend a night away from home in an emergency situation like this? Would you have had stuff that you could turn back to Warrnambool and stay in Warrnambool, to have somewhere that you could have gone to? And did you have an emergency kit packed with some clothes, important documents, photos, medicines in your car? So I'll just end that polling, and it's good to see that some people were prepared, but of course a lot of people weren't. And that's not unusual. That's not something that we haven't seen before. people don't think about being prepared until they may come to a presentation like this. Have you anything to add to that, Raj?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I can take away from that is, as an ex-Cub Scout, it's all about preparation. We were constantly, the mantra was preparation is the key. Always have your knapsack with water in, always have your knapsack with a torch in, those kind of really big preparation, that P word. And this is very much giving us some idea of how prepared you would be. How much forward thinking did you put into that day when you woke up at 8 a.m. on that Wednesday morning? You knew it was going to be quite a bad fire day, and yet you decided to go into town because you had to. How prepared were you? And clearly from the stats here is showing that, preparation needs to be worked on. We need to always have preparation front and center in our minds, especially if we know that something doesn't quite feel right. So yeah, thank you, Julie. Some interesting findings there.
Yes, some interesting things that people will do. We might continue our hypothetical now, Raj. So it is the same day. Let's say it's the same day. You're in Warrnambool. You've had your appointment. You decide that you will go back home. And this time you can get through. The road isn't closed. You check your Vic Emergency app and you see that the fire is actually quite a ways from your house, from your property. So you know you've got time, or at least you think you've got time. So you into your house, you get back to your house all right. It's hot and windy, remember, it is an extreme day. You keep checking your app and the little triangle hasn't moved very much. You think, well, perhaps, the fire's been controlled somewhat, so you're going to get what you need and get out. You are going to leave. You're not going to stay though. So you run into the house, you grab your cat. You have actually got the cat basket at the door because he'd been to the vet last week. So you grab the cat and put her in the basket, take her out to the car. That's fine. You leave the door open because you don't want the cat to be too uncomfortable in the car. You run back in, you grab your passport, your insurance, because you heard people before had lost property and not had their insurance papers. You take them back out to the car, and just as you get in the car, you think, oh, the photos. Your 5-year-old had a birthday on the weekend and you actually used your camera rather than your phone. You want to grab that. So you can run back in to grab the camera. And then you come back out to the car, you notice that it's actually got very windy, very dark, and it smells heavily of smoke. And there's embers. Embers are starting to fall around you. So what are you going to do now? You look at the embers and you think, you've got to get out of here. So you grab your stuff, you look around, and there's embers actually in that pile of leaves that you've been meaning to clean up. So what do you think now? What are you doing now? You look up and the gutters are starting to catch fire with the leaves in there. How does this make you feel? What are you going to do at this stage? What could you have done differently to not be in this situation?
And again, just put your comments in the chat function. This is as real as we can make this hypothetical situation, and this is not too far from the truth. This is what can happen and what has happened in many scenarios in days gone by. Predicting fire behavior is extremely difficult, but as human beings, we can do preventative measures to keep us safe. So in this scenario, what is the one thing that you could have done differently? And again, it comes back to the point, well, why be in harm's way? Why be in a situation where you are putting this huge amount of pressure on yourselves? And this is, we're not even taking into consideration that this is actually just a hypothetical. Had this been a real life situation, can you see the intensity of the stress that you would be under?
So if you think about, while you're thinking about it, the stress you're under just thinking about it in the actual physical world, when it's happening to you, you start thinking, well, Where are the kids? Did they go to school today? Are they in Mortlake or Warrnambool? Which school did they go to? Where are they? What about your partner? Where is your partner? On the road back from Geelong, because he's been away. We had a meeting for the last couple of nights. And all of this you're thinking at the same time as these little sparks, these little embers are dropping around your property. So of course, the take-home message for this is be prepared and leave early.
And there you have it, isn't it? That is the bottom line, isn't it, Julie? It's all about preparation. That dreaded P word, preparation, is the key. Plan ahead. Be prepared. You know, this fire game is a non-predictable game, but the one outcome that is definite, and that's fatality and loss of life and property. Why risk it? Download that all-important Vic Emergency app. Get yourself organized. Be on top of your game. Risk mitigation. We are prepared to offer you bushfire planning workshops, and again, the resource for that will be available through the download. And we'll gladly visit your locality and provide you with that information. But it's all about taking ownership, understanding some of the fundamentals, the essentials of fire behaviour, and being able to outsmart fire. Be out of harm's way, leave early. I'd like to make just a very quick reference now to COVID-19. Unfortunately, this particular situation is still around, although in more recent days we may have some easing of some of those restrictions. But for now, yes, you can still leave early. You can leave a high-risk fire area on the day of a high fire danger. If you are in some form of isolation mode, it's strongly advised that you continue that at your next place of stay, and make sure the folks and people around you are aware that you are isolating, and maintain your COVID safe plan. And it's also advisable and allowable for you to travel for the purpose of preparing your property for the fire season. Let's move on. Let's talk about survival. As we come towards the closing stages of this presentation this morning, again, I thank you for your comments and your presence. Survival options, and we know that survival options have to be considered because even the best laid plans can fail. We often say plan A is your primary, and then plan B, C, D, and E as your backup, and they have to be there. We need to cover as many eventualities as we possibly can. Our earlier animation on radiant heat clearly gave you a good indication of the need to cover up as many areas of bare skin as you possibly can. Radiant heat is invasive. It will get everywhere. We know that it travels in straight lines. We know that it can't travel around corners, but we know that it's intense. Even sitting in a campfire with 2 kilowatts per meter squared is enough to blister your skin in 40 seconds. We don't want that, because when the heat intensity rises to 100 kilowatts per meter squared, as is the case with our bushfires, that's excruciating radiant heat that will burn and blister and cause cognitive malfunction extremely quickly. We suggest that you wear clothing as demonstrated here, or certainly have all elements of clothing in your emergency bag. Have that emergency bag ready with these clothing should you be caught in a situation where you need protection from the radiant heat. The emergency bag should also contain water, a battery-operated radio, as stated earlier, important documents, perhaps on a flash drive, important medications for yourself or your pets, a warm blanket. The resource pack at the end of this presentation will allow you to download the Leaving Early template, which contains a very good example of an emergency pack. A few more points about radiant heat before we move towards the end of our presentation, and that's just reinforcing the need that if you are caught out and if radiant heat is in imminent presence. And of course, remember that the radiant heat will arrive long before the flames actually arrive. It is invisible almost. Seeking shelter behind or inside an object of some kind, be it a shed, a steel shed, a building, behind a water tank, anything that gives you a solid interface between you and the radiant heat will provide some form of protection. Of course, Julie and I would never ever want you to be in this situation, because we know that you'll all have put your plan together. Your fire plan would have been activated at a trigger point. It may be in that watch and act warning, but don't even wait for the warning. The moment you see something's not right or sense something's not right, leave, and leave early. When we talk about other places of refuge within this dark fire-laden world, we talk about water courses, such as rivers and dams and swimming pools. They may well offer you some form of protection from the advancing fire front, the ember attack, and also the radiant heat. We also talk about stationary cars. Cars or vehicles are designed to take you from A to B. They are not designed to be places of refuge. And Julie may explain a bit more about why that statement is so.
And it's very important that you do not drive through fire. So driving through fire is very dangerous in that it is smoky, hot. You have poor visibility. You can't use your sense of smell or even direction as to know where you are. So you should never drive through a fire. But if you do get caught in your car, then you need to try and get off the road and into a place of least fuel. So either already a burnt patch or a patch that has no trees or grass around it. You need to get off the road to avoid accidents, to leave the road open for emergency vehicles. You need to keep your lights on so people know that you are there. You need to get down low, below the windows, to avoid that radiant heat. You need to monitor where the fire is and what the fire is. If the fire does go over you, or even if it goes around you, it will be very quick, it will be very hot, it will be very uncomfortable. The minute that it has passed, you get onto burnt ground, burnt clear ground. Don't get onto burnt ground with trees still on fire above you. You look all around you. So your best place to be in a fire is not there, is to be away before that fire even starts.
Thanks, Julie. When we talk about the neighbourhood or the bushfire neighbourhood safer place, now this is what we refer to as a place of last resort. And it's appropriately named because it is the place of last resort. We would not want you to seek refuge at a neighbourhood safer place of last resort unless it was your very last resort. We would like you to have already left the fire endangered area and be in a safer environment. Our neighbourhood safer places are not places of luxury. They are not designed to be. They are merely an area that's been designated for somewhere for you to go as a last resort to seek refuge away from the radiant heat. They will afford a certain amount of protection from the radiant heat. The nearest one, which is denoted by the green sign that you see there on the slide and the emoji of the 4 persons, your bushfire neighbourhood safer place, the nearest one to your locality in Mortlake is actually the Mortlake Market Square, just down on the corner there by the roundabout where the market is, Market Square. Failing that, if that was inaccessible, the second local neighbourhood safer place is actually on the Noorat Recreation Reserve. Now that's some distance away. Again, if we talk about driving, having to drive to these locations, having roads that are not accessible, these are all mitigating factors. These are all the things that you take into consideration should you be caught in this fire danger situation. We don't want you to be in this situation because you have left early. I show the following slide purely as a final reinforcement of the danger of our fire-prone world. Victoria, Mortlake and the surrounds is very susceptible at this moment in time to fast-moving grass fires as a result of the La Nina effect. We have ample fuel in our locality. There is potential for this fuel to burn and burn in different directions. Fire, a force of Mother Nature, is uncontrollable, it's severe, and it's indiscriminate. We need to be out of harm's way to stay safe. Safety for our families, our homes, and our communities. Some of the resources that I've been alluding to during this presentation can be downloaded. One of them is your Guide to Survival, a very succinct publication that gives you key points around fire safety survival. There's a very good information on property preparation, and this is very much the work of the Property Advice Visit Service. Getting your property ready, having minimal fuel near your homes, having your spouting and gutters clear of any dry matter that might ignite, as shown by the ember attack. Reduce the risk of ember attack. I've mentioned already the bushfire planning workshops that can be organised for your locality, and of course the all-important Vic Emergency app. Another key and important point, and something that is critical to our smaller communities, is connection with our local brigades. Your local brigade captain, Mark Edwards, is very passionate about protecting the environment as best as he can under the circumstances with the resources that he has and the active volunteer force that he also has under his wing. Feel free to contact Mark should you wish to have any further information about the capacity of the brigade, any advice around fire, making your home more fire safe, or an understanding around any element of fire that we've discussed this morning. We fully acknowledge that this may have produced elements of distress with some of you, with some of the visuals, and we apologise for that. Before we close, Julian and I would just like to share our final poll, which is a final poll just to assess how you felt this content was relevant to you and whether or not you would recommend it to other members within fire-prone communities.
Thanks, Raj. Yeah, this poll, and once again, reminded that we don't know who's voting for what. But did this meeting give you a better understanding of bushfire risk in your local area? Yes, no, or confirmed what I already knew? And would you recommend the program to family, friends, or neighbours that live in a fire-prone area? Yes or no? So if you can just answer those questions and let us know what you think. This is for our benefit. And like I said, we don't know who's voting for what. So feel free to let us know exactly what you think. So I'll end that polling and share the results. And it's good to see that people have found some benefit in our presentation, Raj.
Fantastic. I think all that remains for me to say is, first of all, thank you to the audience that have joined us this morning from Mortlake and the surrounding areas. Thank you for your feedback and the chat that you've offered. It's helped us inform the situation for all of us. Our message, both Julie and I, would just like to say, stay safe, monitor your environment, stay on top of your fire sense, use the elements of fire safety essentials to be better informed. Take some of those messages away, understand what fire is, and be prepared. Leave early and stay safe. Thank you for this morning. Julie?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Raj. And yes, leave early, be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.